Uh, Perfect. Thanks, Ben. We have Lawson Wilson here, Larry Alvey here, Evan Buck is here, White here, Mark Good is here, Pete Madeira is here, Larry Alvey is here, not present. We have Jessica Bass, Eric Eaton, Jordan Wolf, and Jane Ashworth. I think we'll give Jane some time, and we'll take a motion on Eric, who contacted me, Jordan, who also sent an email, and Jessica Bass, who.
I'll make a motion to excuse Jordan Wolf, Jessica Bass, and Eric Eaton.
Second.
All in favor? I will just kind of put a peg in for Jane and see how we can revisit it. Minutes from March 16th, even?
We've got two sets of minutes.
Yeah, March 15th and April 20th.
But we approved the earlier one.
Oh, that's
Great.
right.
So I think we just had to report.
So let's look at the April minutes, April 20th, 23. I'll take a motion or comments or any thoughts on any issues anyone see?
I didn't see anything. I'll make a motion to approve them. Second.
All in favor? We are now moving to regular business, and I will.
Can I point out something first? Got me thinking because in some of their recommendations about having the task force carry on with certain duties beyond the enactment of a new comp plan, and I looked at the bylaws, and we automatically terminate as June 30th.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Who's saying the task force should carry on and do things other than.
In
The policies.
in there, okay, but here, my point is, the bylaws say that we automatically terminate as of June 30th unless the bylaws are amended by selectmen.
They did do that. Do that?
No,
Jane said that you were gonna do that to.
We did it on one of the committees. I think it
was it?
Yeah.
Yes, you
I asked
did.
Jane about.
Okay.
Okay. What select board was doing, she said just to extend our term.
So let me just try to get this all bogged down here. So I think, Mark, you responded to a specific goal or strategy or policy.
There were several there, yeah.
So I think that's an agenda item. Does it make sense to hit that at 4B?
Whatever, my main point was I was worried about the bylaws. I didn't know that they had amended them, so.
We're on it.
Okay.
We're never getting on.
I thought. It's like how we have. Have you ever heard resignation?
Well, when we get to the, I think it's 4B, we can, okay, yeah. Ben. Hi, Sam. Ben, Sam. Let's see. Yeah, Ben.
Hi. So I think there were really three things that we wanted to cover tonight. And one of them is kind of this recurring item that's been on the agenda, the future land use map. We've finalized the draft, and there will be a couple other changes, but we can talk a little bit about that. But essentially, at the last meeting, we agreed on the general shapes and the locations of those growth areas, the rural areas, transition areas, and the critical rural areas. So we'll bring that up to discuss a little bit. We also want to talk about this complete list of goals and policies and strategies that you just referenced, to make sure that we are incorporating everything that needs to be incorporating and organizing that appropriately. And then we're going to move into kind of the next phase of that work, which is what we've called an initial discussion about the priority action items. So I think if we can focus on those three things, and then we can start talking a little bit more about, excuse me, what the June meeting would be and kind of the plan for the summer. I think that'd be a great way to wrap up tonight. So unless there's any questions, we can go ahead and move into that first item. And Sam, if you want to share your screen with that map, just to review some of the things that we talked about. This should take maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I think.
So, yeah, as discussed last time, these are the general areas that were agreed upon. The red is growth, the yellow is transition, the green is critical rule, and then everything else that's labeled, all the other parts of town are rural. So this was just basically taken from the map you saw before, but put into the same map template that we're using for all the other maps.
Do you want to explain a little bit, Sam, too, about the final version of this that's going to appear in the draft document? The final couple changes we're probably going to make here.
So these boundaries on the shapes are going to become a little bit more fuzzy and diffuse to sort of really show that this is not based on roads or parcel lines. It's more of like general areas. So that's more of a design component. But the other thing we were thinking was potentially changing this red bubble around Kellytown Road to a different color to sort of distinguish it from the growth area down here. So you'd have like business growth and then residential growth will be a different color. So those are a few of the changes that we're thinking of before it's sort of final, but this is really like the last, it's pretty much there at this point.
And I think that the one other thing I'll say before we get any final reactions or questions is that discussion we had, we had a discussion with Noel Musson and Suzanne over at the Musson Group about the map and the symbology and how we lay that out. And we told them a little bit about the story, the narrative that goes with the map. And they had suggested using color to differentiate between those two growth areas, because the character of those growth areas is different. We envision those not to be moving toward the same kind of land uses. One, as Sam said, is probably going to be more commercial and mixed use in nature around Bass Harbor and Bernard, and the other one will be more predominantly residential with some of those businesses use mixed in, home occupations and kind of things that could support folks in the neighborhood. But they're going to look and feel very different in the future from each other. So having them the same color, they were concerned that might be a little misleading, and frankly, maybe freak people out a little bit if they haven't been involved in all the discussions that this group has had. So happy to get any reactions or questions based on that, but the shapes are the same, the narrative is the same, and it was really just kind of like giving you a sense of where we're going with the draft. Any thoughts, or folks okay with that?
Yeah, the color change, yeah, the designation differences, definitely.
And
Okay.
narrative that accompanies this sort of pros that we'll see when you release the draft. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So the draft, we've started the narrative, and it's probably 2 or 3 pages or so of narrative, I'd say. It's about that much words, a few paragraphs, maybe half a page description for each one of those areas shown on the plan.
Great.
Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is looking at that complete list of goals and policies. And I will say that I do appreciate the time that folks have been spending on this. It's important to flesh this out, but we're really looking at this as this is step 2 of the 3 phases of work related to goals and policies and strategies. The first one is the unprioritized laundry list, the spaghetti on the wall phase of getting the goals and strategies together. And we've taken that work and sorted it and organized it so that it is a little more understandable. It's easier to see how individual strategies relate to which policies. And that's what we want to spend a little more time on at this point before we get into what I think is probably the most rewarding part of this task is sorting those and kind of distilling that big prioritized list, or organized list, I should say, into the highest priority items to think about. So as you know, the spreadsheet you've been working off of is quite long. And I think what I'd like to do is turn it over to Sam to talk about the things that we're adding to the chart, or suggesting that we put onto this, in addition to the things that the committee's been looking at. And then we can talk about if those make sense to include, or what else needs to be on there, or if there's other questions about specific things that people have suggested, we can take it from there. Have you got that handy on your screen, Sam?
Is everyone seeing this?
Yep, we're looking at the Marine Resources tab.
Yeah, so I realized we sent this Monday, so I hope people had enough time to review it. If not, at least briefly check it out. So as Ben said, everything here is sorted, and it's labeled whether it's a state goal or a local goal, the priority, and then the responsible party for carrying out that strategy. So you may have noticed, if you looked at the document, a couple highlighted ones. So those are a couple things that I added, and be interested to get the committee's feedback on it. So the tab that I'm on is Marine Resources, and the first policy is to protect and maintain, and where warranted, improve marine habitat and water quality. So there weren't actually any strategies under this policy, so I added a couple. The first one I added was conduct a townwide survey of all aging septic systems as direct threat to water quality. So we've heard from the chapters that there's an issue with older septic systems. So I put that in there as a potential item to address. And then another strategy under that policy could be to partner with College of Atlantic, and then to gather specific data on fishing and the lobster industry in Tremont. So we've heard the fishing industry is vulnerable, so perhaps partnering with the college, doing some type of research project might be helpful for that. And then the second policy is to foster water-dependent land uses and balance them with other complementary land uses. So for this one, I had the idea, partner with Acadia National Park to improve public boat and recreation access off Seal Cove Pond. So these are just first couple suggestions. So I guess for right now, what do people, if you've had a chance to look at these, do you like these ideas? Are they kind of the direction you're thinking? Just getting people's thoughts on these few that were added.
I was curious why Seal Cove Pond and the recommendations there was under Marine Resources, because it's a freshwater pond and not saltwater. And shouldn't that be under recreation?
That's a good point. It could be moved under recreation. Yeah.
So actually did put it in recreation. I think it is something very similar is in recreation.
Okay. Yeah, maybe just,
And as far as keeping up with a national park for access, they don't, the access we have now was donated to the town, right? It's not a Canadian National Park.
Well, there's access from the east side
In the park.
in the
Oh,
park.
oh, that-
There's that in the park, yeah, right. But the other one is, Maine Coast Heritage Trust. The one that, the Lib Harts gave it to Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and they have full title to it now. I've seen people want close there.
Yeah.
On the other side, yeah.
I guess,
Little clicky there. You see where it is? Yeah, it's not been there. It's not a beginner's ramp.
I guess I feel like I need clarity on that policy to foster water dependent land use and balance it with complementary land use. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
It's a good question. These are, as you noted, the policies in this section are state required policies. And that one in particular has to do with land uses, buildings, businesses that interface with the water. Water dependent land uses are things like docks, boat repair, marinas, those kinds of uses. So the idea at the state level, they want to foster those kinds of uses and balance them with complementary land uses. So rather than say, we're going to have a bunch of residential uses, which are not water dependent, taking up shoreland access. We want water dependent uses. And then if there are other complementary land uses like fueling stations, or maybe those are boat repair kind of places that don't need direct water access, those are the kinds of things that they want to see around the water. And in this case, around the marine coast. So very broad, not particularly well defined, and I think you kind of like it's not understandable to maybe the general public, but that's the intent with that policy. So I think one thing Sam and I were talking about here is that it's not a requirement. You don't need a strategy for every single policy, but I think the work you see highlighted in those cells is work that we've added to this chart rather than coming 100% from the state requirements or the committee, is a little bit of an attempt to see if we can come up with specific things that can be done, strategies to implement policies that maybe don't have any strategies or maybe only had one or two strategies. So that was kind of how we approached the first cut of the work. Again, not a requirement. If you have the state required policy and you don't have any local strategies, that's not going to count against you when the state reviews the plan.
We need to involve all arborists.
Committee,
All of this. Related to them.
I mean, I gotta feel like, I'm just gonna throw this out here, I feel like this, because of where we live and what we are as a fishing community. Fishing economy drives this already, like we already, like it's a requirement because of where we live to have water dependent land use and balance.
Are there some things that we could do to support that or to?
That's the question, and you got Lobsterman, you've got Archie's, you've got 30, all these,
We have a public dock that we maintain as well, both in Bass Harbor and Seal Cove.
Yeah.
There's public access.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I don't know what,
We need to put it in words, that's all.
huh?
We need to just put that in words. Those
But
Would
that's
be
not,
preserved.
oh,
Or to enhance, I don't know, maybe the.
continue to support and
That's fine.
enhance,
Yeah,
continue to support and enhance existing. Blah, 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 I don't know.
water facilities.
I think, this partner with the college and landed together, specific gather of fish and lobster industry in Tremont. I think that should be more broad,
It's problematic right there.
college and Atlantic,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because fishing's gonna change in the next 10 years. Because of, climate change and regulation. So it's gonna be different then.
Sorry, to go back, sorry, I'm still stuck on the one with the 2B. Does that also include any restaurants or anything down by the Bass Harbor area?
What's the,
Yeah,
Fostering dependent land uses, balancing them with complementary land uses, or Thurston's, or,
CP catch, seems like.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of, the places that depend on the marine catch.
Become water dependent. I mean,
I think there's a
State is not.
yeah, I mean, I think that specific example might be a good one, because a restaurant by itself is not a water dependent use, right? But Thurston's is a restaurant, but they also have some other things going on in that property, if not right in that structure, right? So it's I would consider that very complementary. I think something that is not complementary would be
Steakhouse.
houses, frankly. If you just had a bunch of single family homes that replaced a water dependent use, who are going to start being concerned about things about noise and odors and early working hours and those kinds of things, that probably wouldn't be complementary. So I think that this policy is about being mindful to avoid those kinds of conflicts.
There's policies in place for that currently. The economics basically is what makes that not as successful as it is. Residential land prices are higher than commercial fishing land prices.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty much limited that. There's restrictions on removing it from fishing and all that. So probably, I don't think we could do much more, but I think continuing the policy we got is probably a good idea.
Okay. That's good discussion.
I want to go back to 1B about the College of Atlantic. I think it should be more broad that, the town, community supports the fishermen. And whatever changes they have to make in the future to make it a work of one.
Does it make sense to partner with research institutions, COA and the?
I don't know if we should name it. I think we should just put it broad out.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had it in, I put it in one before this.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the partnering is a good idea, but maybe just not limit it to COA? It could be
Right.
nonprofits or research or institutions or something like
More
that.
broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to think that some CO students meeting with the fishermen may find themselves a little wet.
The fishermen would want something a little more broad.
Okay.
Like MLA maybe.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
It might be worth mentioning, looking for expanding marine use, aquaculture or
Supporting
something.
the fishermen for the next fisheries, whatever that is.
Yeah. So I'll make a couple notes too. And one thing that I do want to say too is we don't need to finalize this list tonight. I think what we want to do is walk through some of these, have a little bit of this conversation to get a sense of, some of the challenges with the way things might be worded, and give you all a chance to suggest some additional goals and strategies where they might be appropriate. So that's Good. I'm gonna make some notes here. I know Sam is taking some notes on the screen. I'll take notes on my own here as well.
For 1A, I wondered if that is also in the water resources chapter. And then in the chapter that was written that these came from, it was noted that there's pollution that has prevented clamming, like clamming flats are polluted. And I wondered, that was in the chapter written. I was wondering, where does that pollution come from and how can that be
I
addressed?
think I put that in there, and I'm just going by what I know. I don't know of anything official.
Well, the harbor is, we can't clam in the harbor, and that's gonna be permanent. The state's not gonna allow ever again in the harbor.
It's-
So
The
There's,
water quality is just what I was questioning. So is it okay or not okay? I don't know.
there are certain things. There are several licensed overboard discharge.
mhm.
So in other words, septic is raw sewage is going right into the ocean. Okay, and that's licensed by the state in certain
Some
cases.
books.
And no, from houses. And then there's also probably runoff from people with livestock and that sort of thing, down brooks and that. Yeah,
It's high bacterial count.
yeah,
The systems aren't untreated.
it's nothing new. The plant's been closed for years. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
There are 19 of those licenses right now.
There, I think we're last year.
Yeah. And they've had trouble up around Seal Cove and the flats up there too, those closed. Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think they're close for, well,
I think a lot
They-
of
they have
closed
been
permanently.
people plan there.
Just as a newbie question, because I don't know much about the marine at all. Are boats under requirements to not pollute, just like cars? You know,
Yes.
like,
But whether they comply with the rules is the question.
well, the reason I ask is I went down to Bernard dock just because it was a gorgeous morning. I just wanted to go hang out there. And someone was, oh my gosh, the blue smoke coming out of one of those boats. And I don't know who it was. I don't need to know. But I was like, are there any, whatever you want to call it, like regulations
Are
about
you
it?
talking exhaust or?
I guess so. I mean, the blue smoke was
Probably
not
so.
coming up out of that boat and it wasn't that big of a boat.
Probably diesel engine, and
Right.
that's why you see a lot of smoke.
It's-
Yeah.
Poorly tuned.
Okay, I just don't know, but I'm thinking of water quality. That's all it is.
I don't
Could be airport.
think that those boats go through like annual emission inspections,
No.
the way cars do.
So does that contribute to harmful water
Ours do.
quality or is it just not?
This is California.
I mean, I'm not talking because it's always been there, we always leave it there, but is it something that will just remain because that's the way things are?
They're gonna be electrified in a while, they just don't know it yet.
Well,
Okay,
I mean, there's not,
they don't.
my point of view, there's not enough regulation.
okay. I don't know if we need to take the time.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be able to do that.
Have to be a local
That's not-
regulation, probably be a state regulation.
I think when they get the engine, it has to be in certain settings, then maybe it goes.
The bigger issue.
Just like a car meets its limits to begin with, but we don't have annual testing like some states like California, we just appear to control it.
Can we just get back to what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so I think it was a little hard to pick out exactly how we would change that 1A based on the discussion. I think that you know, the intent was about septic systems impacting the marine resource.
Now,
It may
Matt,
well
are
be.
you talking about septic then? Is it comment about private septic? So surveying private septic.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I wasn't sure if it was municipal septic, which I could see, or private septic. So I think
There's no municipal here.
there isn't, right, I know, they're just picking an outside example. So, yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah.
Seems like a good idea, seems hard to do, but
I don't know how you do survey.
Yeah.
private
Would it be a harbor
septic.
committee?
Okay.
How do you survey? We can make to the town.
you know, then you'd hire a consultant who would
Inspect each system.
Inspect
I mean,
the house.
Yeah, it's very often something you do through the files at the town office of getting a sense of just the age. Someone's not going to
Okay.
necessarily go out, drive around and look and see
Yeah.
which systems are squishy and muddy and which ones look okay.
And then maybe, and then then would you try to parlay it into federal dollars or grant money to come in and help people upgrade them? Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's the next step is figuring out a way to kind of remediate the oldest or the most problematic.
I believe that because actually, I don't know if
It's
we
a
can do
great
it.
idea.
And more than once we've had, we've had before the planning board. Look at that house, that was gonna do the weddings and stuff.
It never came before us, but yeah. Yes. It were here, shut the shit down.
Leave that one, see what happens.
What are you talking about? This is a marine resource.
Yeah.
Which one?
1A.
1A. But I don't know if it's a harbor committee that was responsible for that.
No,
No, yeah, I agree with that.
I don't even know if this should be in the marine resource.
Well, the whole theory is that it eventually
Affects the harbor.
to the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the theory, right?
Well, what about natural
Or well, or
We
water
could put it in
resources.
both.
or water resource?
You could put it in both.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, I think the inventory chapter does talk about water quality issues in Bass Harbor and around that vicinity. And we know that's where a lot of development is. And frankly, it's a lot of older development. So it may only be a piece of the overall puzzle, but it's may not be insignificant. So I would encourage you to think, if maybe it does belong in another section, or maybe it belongs in another section as well as this section. I think that those are the kinds of things that we'd like to be able to get a sense of over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think the other thing I heard is people saying the harbor committee shouldn't be responsible for this. If you go through this list again and see where, responsible party and you think, oh, that shouldn't be there, like, feel free to, I'm sure we're going to give them back the rights to edit and go back through. Is that right? Yeah, so we were filling this in based off of just looking at the town website, finding committees. And if you notice, we actually have town staff responsible for carrying out a lot of these strategies, which could be quite burdensome on the town. So if people have any thoughts on that, so feel free to add. But we were just going off of like what we saw on the website and committees.
I would just put Jeff Buck next to everything.
Okay.
I don't know, I like that. Actually, put that.
So Sam, did you want to go through any of these other tabs or talk about any other specific examples?
Yeah, I'll go through, I think I had a couple in ag and forestry, and we could take a look at those. Yeah, so under policy number 3, which is to create awareness of the Tree Growth Taxation Act and the Farm and Open Space Act. So there's a state strategy under this, which is encourage owners of productive farm and forest land to enroll in the current use taxation programs. And then I added another one under it, 3B, so partner with Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry to organize and facilitate workshops for the public about farmland, woodlot, and open space tax programs. So more of a like an outreach education type thing about these tax programs. And then number 4 was to optimize forest land for subdivision development. So
that's a local goal, right?
Yes, it's a, yeah, this is actually a local goal, but there were no local strategies to go with it. So the first one that I added is to update cluster development standards to allow for density bonuses in exchange for farm and forest land preservation. So I know there is cluster provisions in the ordinance today, but I don't think there's anything about density bonuses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see anything in that regard, so I added that. And then the next one under it is yes.
Is it okay if I just break in for a moment? That optimized forest land for subdivision development is a local policy. But I was wondering if the person who had that as, or suggested that as a local policy, might be able to tell us a little bit more about what that means, as far as, is it forest land, making it easier to develop forest land, or thinking about where it'd be most appropriate? Or I'll stop talking so I can hear what the conversation is there.
I bet it was there.
No, it was actually Jessica and me, and I didn't do it, so. No, wait, it was Kevin and me. Yeah, I didn't say anything about that.
I didn't put that in.
Yeah.
We all have access to the document.
Yeah.
And we're encouraged to.
We all had access, but it couldn't have been.
Right.
It's probably no one here.
I had a couple questions. You answered one, like what the heck MDACF is. I got that now, but what? I mean, if you look at our existing comprehensive plan, it mentions that there's almost no farmland, and what there is
So there are public tax programs for
The craters.
farmland, woodlot, and open space tax programs.
So tree growth.
But realistically, you know, it's gonna be house lots, if anything.
But I don't think it means you don't, you don't have an education record.
I attended a workshop led by MDACF about these tax programs. It was a Zoom thing. It was interesting. I learned a few things. It seemed useful. And you're right, like, I don't own farmland.
I mean, isn't
but-
there's
but-
farmland over by the others that, where the public used to be, they took it down.
Kelly Farm,
Yeah.
that's,
You know, but it's not ever gonna be a farm. It's gonna be a community garden.
It's a garden, they call it farmland.
So optimize forest land for subdivision development, that's mostly what is here is forest land, correct? So if you're putting in if we want affordable housing, is that what this is leaning toward? Then it would have to be on forest land, correct? So that's what this is related to, probably to be proactive when subdivisions are being planned in forest land, in Tremont.
Yep, I just wanted to get some group feedback on this before we ran through the strategies to make sure that we were talking about the same thing. When I read it without any other context, it sounds like maybe someone wants to turn all the forest land into subdivisions, and I don't think that's really what it means.
Neither do we.
I don't think everybody's-
Okay. I'm gonna flag that, and we can maybe suggest some alternative wording.
I do like how you approach those, and fine, but density bonuses and exchange, so you can do that, and maybe if you do development, there's the quid pro quo is that you then, preserve other types of land for something else.
That's kind of a cluster development. Everyone does anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
You group the houses close together, to preserve.
Right.
Strategies seem to be being proactive. Developing standards. Putting extra standards in when some visions that they are creating are. And it needs to be done. Proactive.
Yeah, I think 4C is a little, I don't know.
What does that say?
You gotta get a letter from MDAP or.
Yeah.
Providing written proof that the subdivision will not affect farm and forest.
That does go beyond the kind of baseline state requirements.
Right, yeah, for subdivision, usually it's letters from inland fish and wildlife or natural communities, vernal pools, things like that, but yeah, this is going a step further.
Is that a step too far? And additionally, I will say, even if it is a strategy, that might be one way to accomplish that policy. It doesn't mean that the town would have to implement it exactly as it's envisioned or written in the comp plan. It's really just, it's important guidance. But you know, it's an important reminder for all of these strategies that they're suggestions on how to make progress on the policies, right? They're not things that have to be done or requirements that you're putting on yourself. It's really just opening up some options and putting things on the table.
I think the substance of 4C that makes sense to me, and I think it could sit as written or it could be amended to say that, like, we want to make sure that we balance the preservation of existing forest land and our ecosystems with the promotion or the building of new housing, and or new development in general. And so that we want to do that while thinking about conservation of the ecosystem and the generation of new housing. How exactly we do that and what role does DACF play in helping us determine that? I don't know the details, but we could also let the illustrious planning board figure that out down the road.
We also put some of that in the natural resources chapter,
Without,
strategies.
right.
and such.
I'm not sure we talk about promoting building development, but we did talk
No,
about preserving.
but
ecosystems.
preserving.
Are there other things in other tabs or other specific policies or strategies you wanted to discuss? I know that folks had spent some time with this, and happy to talk a little more about things that are on your radar.
Under historic, you mentioned planning board about protecting historic and archaeological resources. Our ordinances, our site plan review ordinances, subdivision ordinances already require that.
I'm going to suggest, Mark, if you have this sort of like line item, we're going to have access to this document. And so we can go through and we could actually like add a column for comments or things like that. That if we, I mean, unless there's some things that you think that we should like discuss. I agree. I think that's a great point, but I'm not sure we need to take time tonight to deliberate about whether or not our ordinance includes, you know, points to this.
Well,
and that.
the fact is our ordinance does do that.
Yes.
So my question is, are you suggesting we, and I'm asking our consultants, that we expand on that somehow or what? I don't know what.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you may find other examples like this because these policies and strategies that are all required by the state, and these are for the historic section, haven't changed in like, I don't know, since the 90s, right? And they're probably the exact same ones as in your current comprehensive plan. So you may have you know, done good work and updated your ordinances the way you said you were going to in the last plan, but the state hasn't changed their requirements. So when someone from the state review goes through, they're going to look and see if these things are in your plan. So what I might suggest, and we've done this in other communities, is instead of saying, like in 1B, adopt or amend land use ordinances to require the planning board or other designated review authority to incorporate maps and information provided by the Maine Historic Preservation Commission into the review, just say something along the lines of note that to the degree that that's already a requirement, and then examine whether or not there needs to be further attention. You know, just say, yes, this is, like Sam said, it's complete. It's already a submission requirement. And, you know, maybe the strategy is the planning board should have a discussion on whether or not it's the simple submission requirement, or if it becomes, you know, we change some performance standards related to that mapping. So I think that it needs to be in here in some form that's similar, but you're right, it doesn't take into account the degree to which you've already made these changes. So if you have comments, I think that would be good to make it that note, and we can come up with some alternative language that keeps the spirit of that strategy, which needs to be in there.
Could I suggest maybe saying something about updating the information that we use now? Like, I don't know whether it's changed. We use information from the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. Stuff that's in the current comprehensive plan. So I don't know, maybe trying to update that or something.
Yep.
And I'm gonna guess the same's true with underwater. You mentioned stormwater management standards, and which we also have in our current ordinances. And in fact, our LUO references 38 MRS 420-D, which you also recommend in there. So it's probably the same story, right?
Is it 1C, the update? Not what 1C says. I wrote that.
What's that?
Where 1C is for the update.
I didn't, maybe, I'm working from notes that I wrote, so maybe I missed that.
But it says work with a local or county historical society.
Oh, and the other one, yeah. I was
Necessary
looking at,
plan
yeah.
for a comprehensive community survey, community historical and archaeological. Well, do a survey, and that.
Okay,
that-
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
We're going to water resources. Right, I have a question, just because in here, there's something. It's pub for 3A, it says public works, and I just wasn't clear what public works are.
It's our public works department, town's public works department.
Oh, just over here, the garage and all.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
And the work.
Sorry, dude.
Never mind, thank you.
Right. And like Sam had said before, if there's someone else who needs to do that work with them or instead of them, it'd be great to have some suggestions there. I think that this could be Public Works and Select Board, for example. Public Works, Select Board, town staff, something like that, because I'm sure all of those groups and people would have some involvement in this, because there's multiple pieces to this. Part of it's adopting the practices, part of it's about requiring the implementation, and that's going to be different people, different groups. But that's a great question, and a good example of maybe there need to be other names in that responsible party column.
Underwater, I didn't understand what public wellhead and aquifer recharge area protection mechanisms are.
Is that up at the top?
In the water.
Mechanism shuts it off.
And on.
Yep. So if there was a public water supply, or if there was a mapped aquifer in town, sometimes there's ordinances that you can put in place to, don't have underground petroleum tanks in this area. Don't have auto repair uses in this area. Those kinds of things would protect those resources.
Instead, we have 1,500 drilled wells in town.
I have two more to bear with me. Under recreation, you mentioned that things should be implemented by the recreation board. Our recreation board doesn't exist. It's dissolved a while back, so maybe one of the things you should add was to create a recreation board to do this work.
Okay. This is not just at me. And the first thing we put on there was bring back a recreation. Like, that doesn't exist now, but that's one of the things, that's probably where that came from.
But you know why it doesn't exist? Because nobody wanted to be on it.
So to sell it.
If the strategy says to prioritize communication between the rec board, select board, planning board, so I think we assumed based on that, the rec board must be an active committee.
Go by skating rink.
Well, when we might have misconstrued what we put on, we might have done the wrong thing, basically, but Jessica and I, when we put our chapter together, the first thing we did was we said we need to have a recreation board, and everything else was based on that, so. I don't know what to say then if we can't.
Yeah, maybe that's a new policy. Maybe new policy number one is create a group in town to be in charge of these kinds of things or be involved in these things.
And the other thing was under population, say the town staff should be in charge of establishing restaurant stores and et cetera. I mean, there were other things there. I just quickly wrote this down. But isn't that a private sector? Why is the town staff supposed to be involved in, how are they supposed to do that?
Harder way.
Put down Mark Good there.
Let's see.
I think establish track of your area.
Where is it?
Yeah. Was that more about creating the zoning or doing the public investments that would help set the stage for these kinds of private sector things?
Oh, that's what I said. Okay. I'm sorry. I was talking to your question again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my question was to either the author of that local goal or to the group at large. Do you think that, you know, rather than have the town be responsible for establishing attractive year-round resources and amenities, is it, you know, updating the zoning or making the public investments to kind of set the stage for those kinds of private sector activities?
Zoning's pretty wide open on that right now. Problem is itself at times.
I think it would be nice if we could figure some way to encourage the kind of growth we'd like to see. I don't know quite what form that would take. or how
Yeah,
you make
who does that?
happen. Yeah,
You
mean
establish a
around
development committee?
families?
whatever. I think the town should. It would be good if, yeah, the planning board, so if you guys aren't really a planning board, that's just your title. Yeah. You know, but
Yeah. Town planner.
yeah,
So, like 7 of them are Harvard, and it costs about $750,000 a year.
Yeah. So there is a recommendation about them. There is a recommendation to partner for like with other towns to have a planner for, and that's, I think, a very good idea.
It used to be a town planner at Tremont, my wife was it.
Really?
This work for the.
What's she doing?
Is that in somewhere in the spreadsheet about the shared planner
Yeah.
resource?
Yeah, I think that's a very good thing.
I don't remember seeing anything about that.
yeah, I can,
Oh, yeah.
I'm supposed to be done.
Who?
So that might be a separate
Select board.
strategy, would be to partner with other towns. To build to hire a collaborative town planner.
Shared resource.
I think 1C, responsible party could be the Acadia Chamber of Commerce, who's the Chamber of Commerce for Southwest and Tremont.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Cross Harbor Tremont Chamber of Commerce.
That's what's called, yeah.
You don't.
Um,
No. Well,
So that's an entity that could help.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd be.
I don't know how used to be.
So Sam, as you're bouncing around, would you mind bouncing back to the population tab? And I think Lawson's idea was Chamber of Commerce in that cell that's highlighted right now as
Right.
one potential entity to think more about this. And I do believe we should work on the wording of strategy 1C. Because, you know, like someone said, you know, the town is not going to directly do those things, and the strategies in this sheet, I think it's important. Those are things that somebody can do. You know, if we can point to a group and say, we want you to do this, you know, that's not really in any one person's direct control, certainly not in the town's direct control. Things like zoning and public investment are to help set the stage for this. But maybe we need to think about a little more about what could the chamber do? They could encourage, you know, streetscape and beautification that would maybe attract restaurants and stores and employers, those kinds of things. Something like that, I think, would be a great strategy. So we can work on that. Well, that's good. So I would encourage you, we'll open this up, or we'll reshare it with the group to add some additional notes here. I think we're, you know, 85% done on this. I think the list of strategies and policies is great. To the extent we can add to that, that's fine. But I think it's really more about like sharpening up and fine tuning the things that are there now, and moving into this next phase, which is the next thing on the agenda, about taking that whole big long list of multiple tabs worth of you know, recommendations, and how do we prioritize those things? How do we show them that cut across? Because like you said, you know, there are some strategies that are important for marine resources, natural resources, and economy. You know, they cut across those things, and those are what we want to like try and identify through this work, so that it's easier for people to know when they look at this big, thick document what's really important. So to that end, Sam and I have taken a crack at grouping these things into themes or categories that do cut across some of those sections. The sun is really weird here. I'm going to pause for a moment and close the shade a little bit.
Yeah, no problem.
So we've been having these meetings for like since last fall, and you've now seen the sun. I think it's gone all the way around, and now it's coming in the window in my face here. So let me share something, Sam, before we go into this.
Okay.
Quickly. I want to share my screen. We were grouping these things into themes and categories. So that's really what we were trying to do. And I want to go back to the vision statement. This is a vision statement that we did over the winter. This is the version that we shared with folks at the Future Land Use Workshop back in February. Do you guys have that up on your screen?
Yep.
So what we did was we were trying to like go back to this vision statement, go back to some of those core values, the elements of the vision statement, to help organize some of these goals and policies that do cut across themes. So we took that organized list that we just went through and looked at it, measured it against the vision statement, and you'll see from the highlights, we came up with three. There's three colors here. I don't know how well they show up on the screen, but we had some green elements that all have goals and policies and strategies associated with them. We had the blue and the yellow, and they all kind of in broad cross-cutting ways have a number of strategies and policies associated with them. So I'll at this point I will turn it over to Sam, and you can share those three things that we were talking about earlier this week. Sorry if I threw you off your game. There you go.
Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah, so we kind of distilled three main themes that came out of sorting through this spreadsheet. And of course, feel free to comment on any of these 3 items. So this is, as Ben said, kind of where we're heading with this, getting 3 goals and then policies under each one, and then action strategies under each of the 3 larger goals or overarching themes. So item number 1 is invest and improve public access to water and conserving natural resources. So taking a look back at the vision statement, this is more of the section that talks about how Tremont is anchored in its working waterfront, its community, small town community, rural character, natural resource conservation is important. So this touches on a couple different themes in the inventories. It touches on water resources, marine resources, natural resources as well. So that's an important part of Tremont's identity. And then number 2 that came out of this is provide housing options that support a year-round community while protecting rural character and small town Tremont. So again, back to the vision statement of trying to secure affordable housing options for a year-round community. And housing has been a theme that's come up throughout this process. So we thought it was something that really stood out and was important to note here. And then the last one, prioritize safe transportation for all along Route 102 and support island-wide transit. So from the vision statement, sort of talking about traffic and congestion impacts on MDI, especially in the summer months. People expressed they want to see sidewalks, bike paths along 102, and partner with or have more public transportation stops in Tremont as well. So I guess pausing here, does anyone have any comments on these 3 themes?
What sticks out to me is that, I mean, I think that those seem great and that's wonderful. And I noticed that we don't talk about promoting and encouraging and safeguarding the working waterfront and sort of marine economy.
So that was working community,
Around.
not just waterfront, but everybody. I don't know if that's really a goal because we do it now. I think we just want to continue supporting.
And what you're talking about is protecting the working waterfront access.
Working waterfront.
Yep.
So the working community, the whole community.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
There were things that we highlighted in the vision statement that were, I could see it, being built into a little bit of this goal number 1 or item number 1, as well as item number 2. When we talk about access to the water, in the vision statement, it talks about the economy, earning a livelihood, as well as recreation, relaxation, an important part of what it means to live in Tremont. So those are the things about the water that apply to item number 1. Item number 2, I think, is, when we talk about rural character and small town Tremont, that's the kinds of things that were in the vision statement are quiet, small town, coastal Maine, sense of community, quality of life, rural character, those kinds of things. So I think that clearly, housing in a year-round community need to get done in the context of protecting rural character in small town Tremont. And I think part of that is the water access, but maybe there's a way to reword number 1. So invest in, continued protection or as well as improved access, those kinds of things, not only for, or maybe we need to add something, specific about for work and livelihood, as well as fun and relaxation.
I was at a conference last week and they said that Tremont is one of the 30 communities on the coast of Maine that has more fishermen / lobstermen per capita than any others.
Hmm.
So it's really important.
Yep.
Just really defines this unique place.
Yep. Yeah, why don't you switch down to the next slide, and that gets into some of the more detail. And the way I'm thinking about these is that the thing on that previous slide and the things that we've labeled as item 1, item 2, item 3, those are the goals. Those are the overarching goals of the plan that come directly from the vision statement. And the strategy, the policies and the strategies that you'll see on the next few pages are coming from the spreadsheet that we went through a few minutes ago. So I'm kind of excited. I like the way that we're able, in this case, to so very clearly tie the strategies and the policies directly to the vision statement. And I think that we're making an attempt to do that very clearly. So it's still a draft. I think that, those are good comments, and we want to kind of kick this around a little bit with you this evening and over the next few days, but this is kind of where it's heading. So Sam, do you want to walk through this a little in more detail?
Yeah, so these bullets are policies that will go under this goal. And I believe for the most part we used local policies and local action strategies. I think number 2 is a state policy, I believe, but the other 2 are local ones that you guys came up with. So these were taken from a couple different chapters, natural resources, for example, and marine resources as well. So the first one, to build public awareness and understanding of ecosystems throughout Tremont. And then the next is to protect, maintain, and where warranted, improve marine habitat and water quality. And then finally, to protect, maintain, and where warranted, improve physical and visual public access to Tremont's marine resources for all appropriate uses, including fishing, recreation, and tourism. So kind of, tying into that overarching goal of public access and conservation, protecting marine habitat, ecosystems. So that's kind of where we're going with this.
And these 3 bullet points are examples taken from the spreadsheet, and it's not meant to be an exhaustive list. I think we're going to continue kind of trying to go into individual chapters and pull out those things that enlist them here with the those overarching goals that we pulled from the spreadsheet. And I think you can probably walk through the rest of those, Sam, relatively quickly, and then we'll just see if people have comments or questions about the approach or the specifics.
So these again 2 local policies under the second goal, providing housing options. So first, to support a sustainable population increase of 20% by 2040 of diverse individuals in age, ethnicity, and skills. And then to encourage and support the efforts of the regional housing coalitions to address affordable and workforce housing needs. And then item number 3 on transportation. So first policy under that, to create a safe bicycle network for recreation and commuting, and then to increase bus ridership for residents and visitors. And so then the next slides are, these tables might be kind of hard to see, so I'll try and make them bigger. So these are action strategies showing sort of the strategy, responsible party, and the time frame. So basically kind of how it is in the table. And these are all strategies that go under all of the bulleted policies. So I guess probably read like a couple of them for item number 1. So organize education workshops on conservation development, and other models for protecting natural resources while promoting smart growth. And I'll go through the next one, number 2, on housing. So an example of a strategy there, as you saw, already partnered with Tremont Housing Authority and Island Housing Trust to improve affordable housing options and access for potential residents. And again, responsible party, time frame. And then number 3 on transportation, as you saw, sort of just taking all the strategies from the doc under that. So one could be establish collaborative lines of communication with regional and state efforts to create bike lanes on state roads. So yeah, these are all from the table we just had open, but they are categorized based on those larger themes. So does anyone have any thoughts or questions?
Would it be possible to send us that in email?
Yes.
Good idea. And also, I was wondering if we could send us maybe a smooth draft of the future land use map. We're in between the final draft.
Yep.
You mean the write-up itself?
No, the actual map.
Oh, the map.
I'd like to see it up close.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, of course.
After you do the color change.
Yep.
Yes, we can do that.
So again, the work you're looking at on the screen right now is kind of where we're going, where we, again, we started with this big, unorganized, or I call it alternatively the spaghetti on the wall work that we did with the strategies and policies, and trying to sort those out and put them into the appropriate chapters. And then what we looked at tonight was like that organized list with the addition of local policies and strategies mixed in with the state required ones. And what we're trying to do here is it's not done yet, but you saw in those last few slides where we want to pull elements, pull individual policies and strategies from those chapters, so that each one of these items, as they're listed here, is going to have strategies from 3, 4, 5 or more individual chapters. So that's where we're heading, and we're going to continue to work on this. Again, your questions or comments tonight will help guide us as we go through this, but the work is going to continue over the next couple weeks.
So my only comment is that I feel like there just needs to be enough emphasis on the fishing, lobstering, that nature, that what makes Tremont Tremont. I feel like there's not as much emphasis as I would like to see in here on that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Got it. So we'll see if we can emphasize that. Well, good. We will send this out over the next week or so. The next section of the agenda is kind of the look ahead. You probably all have that in front of you, but the next meeting on the calendar is June 15th. And for that meeting, we want to be able to show you a preliminary first draft of the entire plan under one cover. So you'll be able to see the table of contents, the introduction, the vision statement, the future land use map, all of these goals and strategies together with the inventory chapters. And we can talk about how those individual sections are organized and make sure that the flow of the document works for you, as well as, spending a little more time on the individual elements. So, for example, we talked about the narrative that goes with the future land use plan. We want you to be able to see that, spend some time with it before the next meeting, so that we can have a conversation about, like we did with these overarching items that we just talked about. Emphasize this more, tie this into it, those kinds of things, so that we are going to be, in that specific example, painting the picture with words that people can use to understand the map better. So that is on the docket for the June meeting. And we penciled in getting that to you a little more in advance than our regular meeting packets, which we usually try and get out a week ahead. We wanted to maybe closer to a week and a half or 2 weeks if possible. We kind of penciled in June 5th as the date to get you that preliminary first draft, so you can spend some time with the narrative you haven't seen yet. And we also want to finalize, if possible, at that meeting, the priority items that we just gave you a preview of, so that we can make sure that those are incorporated into the draft. So the June 15th meeting is going to be hopefully pretty rewarding, maybe a little fun, where you get to see the document all together. And our goal at that meeting is to get to a point where we can get the green light either at that meeting or shortly after that meeting to finalize some of the wording in those sections, so we can start to format it. The inventory chapters are formatted. You saw those over the last few weeks. Those are in PDF form. The text is pretty well finalized. We need to get to that point with the forward-looking part of the plan as well. And we want to give you that preliminary first draft on June 15th. And then in July, by the end of June, get to a point where we could get the authorization from this group to send it to the state, so that the state can begin their review plan. So what that will entail, whether it's the end of June or it waits till a regular July meeting, is that there's a cover form. There's basically an authorization letter that needs to come from Tremont to authorize the state to begin their review. And it needs to be signed by the chair of this group, and it needs to be signed by the highest elected official in town, so the chair of the select board. And when those two signatures are on the form, that's when we can send it to the state. So if I send it to the state tomorrow, they'll just say, we're not going to spend any time on this until we know that this is the copy that Tremont wants us to look at. So that's really what that cover letter is.
Before voters approve of it.
That can happen before the voters approve it. So, yep. The way we had laid out the schedule for this project is that we want to have a plan that's been approved by this group and certified by the state as consistent with the Growth Management Act, that the town can then consider adopting, hopefully adopt it as official town policy. Some communities want to adopt a plan locally and then send it to the state, so that the state can review a plan that's already been, vetted and approved by the town. But if there's changes to the plan that the state requires in order to meet the requirements of the Growth Management Act, then it would need to be reapproved by the town. If those changes were substantive, they made changes that were big enough that the state would potentially, the town would potentially have to readopt it or amend the plan and then readopt it. So I usually recommend that you do what you need to do with the state first, so that the town can just review it and adopt it once, and not have to worry about what the state might do with it after it's already been locally adopted.
That makes sense. What's the typical time frame for the state's review?
The state requires 45 days, and they usually take every single one of them to do their review. And what it involves is they'll take the plan document, the PDF that we submit, and then break it out into the individual chapters. They'll send the transportation chapter to the DOT. They'll send natural resources to DEP, marine resources to the Department of Marine Resources, and so forth. And they all have their checklists that we're using as we put this plan together. And they will make comments that can range from, provide more information about the state program for current land use tax programs, or make sure that the numbers you're using for timber harvesting are up to date, because sometimes the data they might have older, the town might have older, and they just want it to be consistent. So those are typically the kinds of questions and comments you'll get back from the state that need to be addressed over a round or two of revision work. And once you have addressed the state comments, then you get a letter that says this plan is consistent with the Growth Management Act, and that's your gold star to make sure that you've done what you need to do by the state. And the other part of the official review process is that this group, the Comp Plan Task Force, needs to have a public hearing, advertised 30 days ahead. That would, be more official than the informal meetings we've had so far. So you'd have to open the public hearing, take public comment, have discussion amongst yourselves, and then presumably, with any required changes that come out of the public comment, you would recommend adoption of the draft comp plan. And from there, it really doesn't matter how you do it. It's completely up to the town. The state doesn't have a process for local adoption beyond the committee's public hearing. And I think in this case, the intent was to have the plan go to town meeting, correct? So you may choose as a task force, or the planning board may choose to do this, or the select board to have, information sessions or have your own public hearings as part of this work. And I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about ideas for how that might go, or what other towns have done. But it may be as simple as coming out of this group's public hearing with a recommendation, and then that appears on a town meeting warrant. You may also make that recommendation to the select board, and then the select board has their own discussion about, how that appears on the warrant. But regardless, there's a required public hearing, and then whatever other local process you want to go with that before the town meeting itself. So we are, again, if we are submitting this in early to mid-July, we'd be looking at getting finding of consistency in, around September 1st. And you could have a public hearing in the October timeframe. And that, I don't know how that sets you up for, maybe if you want to do a special town meeting or not, but you could then have potentially a couple months of information sessions or whatever you want to do before town meeting, and getting this back in front of the community. But our goal, I'll tell you, our goal right now is to get a plan certified by the state. And then from there, it's really up to the town how you go through your local approval process. That make sense?
Is it ever, yes, has it ever happened that it all gets certified and then the town does not accept it?
Voters don't have to accept it.
And then what does that mean?
Yep, it's possible. I've not personally seen that scenario where the state says this plan is fine, and then residents say this isn't us at all. This doesn't make sense, and it's not what we want. I have seen the opposite situation where a plan is not certified, and sometimes it's not even submitted to be found consistent with the State Growth Management Act. With it, in the most extreme examples, the state says this isn't good. The town makes changes. The state says it's still not good enough, and then the town says, "Well, forget you. This is our plan. This is good enough, and we've worked really hard on this over time, and we're ready to move forward with this as guidance for ourselves." It would mean theoretically that those towns wouldn't get the bonus points for grant applications and some of the other goodies that come with having a plan consistent with the state, but that has happened. So I think maybe kind of like a longer term thing would be to think a little bit more about like if there was, is there an advantage to having a fall special meeting, or is this going to appear on the regular spring town meeting schedule? And what kind of education or outreach do you think would be appropriate to really try and minimize that situation you outlined where the state says this is fine, and then all your neighbors and friends kind of show up and say, what the heck is this? Really, if it doesn't pass, where do you go from there, kind of thing.
What's the time frame for putting it on the warrant? Maybe
In
May
May.
meeting? March.
March.
Is that a question for me?
No, it was not, Ben. It was not.
No, it's gonna take too long. The public hearing process.
Do we have anything else here for Ben? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Dan.
So that's really where we are. I mean, I feel like things are shaping up pretty well, and we're getting close. I think that the responsibility is really on us to make sure that in order to kind of keep things on schedule, that we get you something on or as close to June 5th as we can. But we do have those action items to kind of let you back into that Excel spreadsheet and kind of tune those things up as we do that. So that's all that we had on our agenda tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Make a motion to schedule next meeting for
Yeah.
June 15th, 5:30.
Before you do, you responded to Sarah's email suggesting that we discuss tonight.
Yeah, we can do that later.
Okay. All right.
I'm curious now, discuss what?
No, let's do it in a minute.
Okay.
Motion for the next meeting.
Motion to schedule the next meeting for June 15th, 5:30, right here in the Harvey Kelly meeting room of the town office.
Second, any discussion? No, all in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor? Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Thank you.